A favorite difficulty, or supposed difficulty, which critics like to cite, or have cited in past years concerning the Quran, is that apparently, to their way of thinking, the author of this book was ignorant because he advised the Muslims to follow the lunar year instead of the solar year. And the critics say, well, the author was unaware of the difference in the length of years, that if one follows 12 lunar months, one loses 11 days every. The author of the Quran was well aware of the distinction between the length of the solar year and the lunar year. In the 18th surah, the 9th ayah, it mentions 300 years and gives their equivalent as 309 years. As it happens, 300 solar years is equal to 309 lunar years. But let's go back to my original scheme of the occurrence of words in the Quran. The word month in the Quran, shahr, will be found 12 times in the Quran, 12 times according to the index. There are 12 months in this book. If we find 12 months, how many days should we expect to find? The word in Arabic is yawm. And as it happens, you can look for yourself with a copy of the index. You will find there are 365 days in the Quran. As a matter of fact, the original issue which had me interested in looking up the occurrence of months and days was this distinction between the solar year and the lunar year. Well, for about 25 centuries, it has been known that the relative positions of the sun, moon, and earth coincide every 19 years. This was discovered by a Greek by the name of Meton, and is called the Metonic cycle. Knowing this, I looked again to the index for the word year, sanna, and found, sure enough, it occurs in the Quran 19 times. Now, what is the point of this perfect balance of words? For myself, it shows the author was well aware of the distinction between using words and mentioning words, a fine logical point. But more than that, it indicates the preservation of this book. After giving a lecture on the subject of the Quran, I touched on some of these subjects, and a questioner from the audience afterwards said, how do we know we still have the original Quran? Maybe pieces of it have been lost or extra parts have been added. Well, I pointed out to him that we had pretty well covered that point, because since these items, the perfect balance of words in the Quran, has come to light only in this generation, anybody who would have lost a portion of the book, hidden some of it, or added some of their own, would have been unaware of this carefully hidden code in the book. They would have destroyed this perfect balance. It's interesting to note, too, that while such a thing might be possible to organize today by the use of a computer to coordinate all words so that whatever thought you might have as to the meaning of a sentence, however you might construe an equation out of a sentence, you could check for yourself, and the book would always have the balance of words. If that were possible today, if it were possible 14 centuries ago, why would it be done and then left hidden and never drawn to the attention of those who first saw this book? Why would it be left with the hope of the author who contrived this, that maybe in many centuries someone will discover it and have a nice surprise? It's a scheme that doesn't make sense. In the 25th surah and the 33rd ayah, we are told that no questioner will come to the Muslims with a question for which a good answer has not been provided, and a best explanation for whatever his question. That's Surah 25, Ayah 33. Well, what is it really saying? This ayah has said, for everything they say, we are given something to go back to them and reply. We look again to the index of the Quran, and we find that the word they say, in Arabic, qalu, is found 332 times. Now, what would be the natural counterpart but the Arabic word qul, which is the command, say? And you will find in the index it occurs 332 times also. In fact, an interesting feature of the Quran is that it replies to its critics. as to its origins. That is, no one has yet come up with a suggestion as to where this book came from, which is not commented on within the book itself. In fact, the New Catholic Encyclopedia, under the heading Quran, mentions that over the centuries there have been many theories as to where this book came from. Their conclusion: today no sensible person believes any of these theories. This leaves the Christian in some difficulty, in their own words. You see, all the theories suggested so far, according to this encyclopedia, are really not acceptable to anyone sensible today. They're too fantastic. And yes, the Christian is left in some difficulty. Where did the book come from? Those who have not really examined the Quran usually dismiss it as being, as they say, a collection of proverbs or aphorisms, sayings that one man used to announce from time to time. They imagine that there was a man who from time to time during the day would think of some witty little saying and spit it out, and those around him would quickly write it down, and eventually this was all collected and became the Quran. Well, those who read the Quran find out that it's not anything like that at all. The collection of things said by the Prophet is the subject and the content of hadith. But the subject, the contents of the Quran are all in the form of a composition, an explanation. I cite, for example, the Surah Yusuf, which is an entire story in great detail about one particular episode or one portion of the life of one man. It is a composition. It is for this reason that virtually all those who have actually examined the Quran usually refer to it as being the product of the authorship is attributed to Muhammad and his coadjutors, in their words. His coadjutors. That means those who used to sit with him and compose the Quran. You see, they imagine that the Quran was composed by a committee. They acknowledge that there's too much information and it's too well composed for one man to have assembled. So they imagine that a committee of men used to meet regularly, bring their various sources of information, compose something, then hand it to this man and tell him, go to the people tomorrow, this is your revelation. In other words, it was a fraud concocted by a group of people. But what do we know about fraud? The Quran reminds us in the 34th Surah, 49th ayah, as it says, say, now the truth has come. And falsehood neither invents anything nor restores anything. In fact, it's hard to translate into English precisely, but what this ayah is telling us is that falsehood is not the source of a new thing. A new and truthful thing cannot come from falsehood, and falsehood does not restore to our minds the facts. Truth is agreement with facts. Falsehood is something else. So falsehood is empty. If something is born in fraud, it will never bring us new information. It will never endure. It will only collapse over a period of time. Another interesting ayah is a challenge in the 4th surah, the 82nd ayah, which is addressed to those non-believers. It reads, have they not considered the Quran? If it came from other than Allah, surely they would find in it many inconsistencies. You see, here is a challenge to the reader. If you think you have an explanation for where this book came from, have another look at the book. Surely you'll be able to uncover some inconsistencies to support your case. Imagine a student submitting a term paper or a final exam and then writing at the bottom of the page a note to his teacher, you'll find no mistakes in this paper. There are no mistakes on this exam. Can you imagine the teacher letting that rest? The teacher would probably not sleep until uncovering some inconsistency after a challenge like that. That's not the way human beings speak. They don't offer challenges like that. But here we have it in the Quran, a direct challenge saying, if you have a better idea as to where this book came from,